so proud to be a patron of the Bankstown Poetry Slam, not only because it makes me seem a lot cooler to my 20-something sons and the hip-hop-loving children they are, but what they're doing, what the Slam is doing in helping largely young kids from migrant families in Southwest Sydney find their voice and tell their own stories. So it's just fantastic. To wit, can I ask you to have a look on your table? Somebody hold up and wave around. There's a little sheet on your table with a whole bunch of logos on it of well-meaning institutions. It's called the GWS, thank you, Brett, the GWS Community Fund. We take a bit of coin, we skim off the gigs like this and tip it into charitable causes across Western Sydney, and also try to help with mentorship and other forms of promotion. Despite our meagre offerings from our corpus, more importantly, let's think of it as a pre-vetting arrangement for all of you who want to donate to good causes in Western Sydney. There's at least 8 groups on that. We can find you more, but if you do want to engage your customers or engage those you're regulating or just look cool to your 20-something children, put your hand in your pocket and try and help, or bring some people in to meet with your staff, or mentoring, professional development for some of the volunteer community groups across the West doing such amazing work. We're all here in this room today, no matter where you come from, public, private, community sector, third sector, academia, because we're all both pretty proud of Western Sydney or pretty excited about the potential of Western Sydney. This incredible urban infrastructure, urban regeneration project we're on, with an infrastructure binge to boot, you've got to remember this is being done at global scale. There's, if you take out China, take it anywhere in the Western world, no one. We've eclipsed what's happening in East London. We have simply taken on 2 massive cities, the Central River City and the Western Parkland City, accommodating a population to grow from 2.5 million to 4 million by 2050. It's quite remarkable. We're rebuilding the Central River City, that great suburban arc, post-World War II arc from Hornsby in the hills down to Hurstville, and we're developing the massive opportunity of the greenfield space of the Western Parkland City. Cal Paddocks today, Erytropolis is tomorrow. Erytropoli? There's only one, so an Erytropolis tomorrow. Not good on the Greek. Whether it's motorways, airports, metro and light rail lines, hospitals, universities, stadia, parklands, museums, we are building, when I say we, mostly Premier and the Prime Minister and a whole lot of private sector people in the room, we are building infrastructure right across the place. It's city shaping on steroids. It's a massive region with a multicultural community, but it has contrasts as well. It's not one amorphous mass, it's not one McMansion estate, it's not one public housing estate. It's a truly diverse region stretching from Wallandilly to the Hawkesbury, from Olympic Park to the Blue Mountains, massive region. So this bifurcation of Greater Western Sydney into its Central River City and its Western Parkland City, the contrast there matches the contrast of our social and economic fabric. It's why the dialogue exists in some ways, to try and make sure we can celebrate the successes but address the challenges, because to do either would be silly. I'd happily sit back and revel in the success and take a bit of credit for some of it, but we've got, and you empower this organisation to leave no stone unturned and to leave no one behind to keep going forward. It's in a way impossible to marvel at the shimmering citadels of corporate towers coming out of Parramatta Square with not lamenting the sometimes squalid state of some public housing estates across Western Sydney. You simply can't boast of the magnificence of up in Sue Templeman's area, of the World Heritage listed Blue Mountains, without shaking your head at what the neglect we've done to let our rivers of the central city go the way they've gone. You can't celebrate the success of the incredible university and TAFE opportunity now across our region, of the James Roosters and Westfield and Santa Sophia high schools, or the new fancy TAFEs at Kingswood and Meadowbank, while we still know that so many kids in our growth suburbs are sweltering away in demountable classrooms. We can't even welcome the wonderful new hospitals, and there's hospitals everywhere, and I pay tribute to the growth of our health infrastructure. But if you can't find a doctor to bulk bills, you can't get your kid into childcare, you're stuck in an emergency room with not enough nurses, or you continually watch aged care fail our parents and grandparents, you can't even celebrate fully our medical success. And to the great multicultural experiment of Western Sydney, and it is great, by any global standard, we are a harmonious multicultural experiment. But when the pandemic hit, governments, they were so disengaged, governments couldn't even talk to them and locked many of them down. It will go down in infamy the day on television when the people of Fairfield and Liverpool and Bankstown, etc., watched the people of Bondi cavorting on the beach when they had soldiers at the end of the street. We can't continually separate Western Sydney from the rest. And Prime Minister, and you and the Premier, we can't even celebrate proudly the development of our new airport if you live in Liverpool or Campbelltown or Penrith and you can't get a rapid bus there. I know there's going to be a tall battle between where it's at, and I appreciate there's going to be a fight between federal and state. We've got to find a way, and if the private sector can help, we'll help as well. We have to get those buses. You can't have a Western Sydney airport, not let Western Sydney residents get to the airport. So we've got to find a solution and get through that somehow, and we'll be in the trenches with you to find that. Look, this is not meant to be a regional whinge, but a timely reminder that no matter how well we've done, no matter how much people in this room have collaborated, and we're a collaborative region, how much government has put on the table and will continue to at federal, state and local level, there's still so much more to do. That's where this fella comes in and his colleagues. With him, us all together as one grand coalition. It is a significant personal honour to host the Prime Minister's first official address to Western Sydney. In the interest of time, I'll spare you the long shared journey. Suffice to say that when he was a Triple J loving firebrand lefty, I was a Today FM loving yuppie in the 80s. We were slugging it out at factually in different parts of Young Labor and Sydney Uni. He seemed to win all the time, just so that you know. Some years later, as we drifted toward the centre, he became the Minister of Infrastructure and I became the Head of Infrastructure Partnerships Australia. We rebonded over our shared love of rugby league, infrastructure and cities. I had the great pleasure of serving as Anthony's nominee on the committee with Mike Murdoch that chose, and Jennifer Westacott, that selected Badgerys Creek for the airport, and then served as one of his directors on the Moorebank Intermodal Board, the inland port at Liverpool. These days, our sons, Thomas, mine, who's here somewhere, and Nathan, who's somewhere, seem to get together and cause mischief, and we're both away. So the connections become intergenerational. Look, as you can tell, I'm a friend and a fan of the PM, but that won't stop me from challenging him to be an even greater friend to Western Sydney with what he does. You know, when I urged him, and Michelle Rowland, went and saw him last year to say, why don't you make Michelle Rowland your Shadow Minister of Western Sydney, because your infrastructure minister's in Melbourne, there's lockdown. He said, don't need to, Brownie. I'm the Shadow Minister for Western Sydney. So, sorry, Michelle, I tried. He had other things for you, and he lived true to it. So, excuse me, we have 5 quick things on our agenda to remind the Prime Minister. Housing Australia Fund, magnificent, $10 million, pay tribute to Jason Clare putting it together before you on COVID. He has one good press conference, he gets promoted out of housing. We have to start all over again, but with Julie Collins. But the Housing Australia Fund, there's no bigger issue in Western Sydney than our housing crisis, our homelessness crisis, our housing affordability crisis, key workers. We all have to fight together, and we've got to get more private money so your $10 billion becomes $20 billion, because that's what we want to achieve. And we want it going to community housing providers, not lost in bloated state bureaucracies. Again, we want to get people's houses built and people housed. We'd like a flood summit. I know you and the Premier are talking about dams and everything else. We think this region, it's not raining for 5 minutes at the moment, but it'll be up again this afternoon. This region deserves a say in how we manage not only dam wall and no dam wall. What about water recycling? What about the work you've done with Castlereagh Connection and roads to recovery? What about our planning future? All of Sydney's held up with flood planning at the moment. We would like to see you and the Premier co-convene a summit and bring us all into the discussion. Importantly, thank you. We're looking forward to deliver on your promise to take SBS from monocultural Arts Harmon to multicultural Western Sydney. There's 7 mayors, I said, in the room, we're all happy to hold it, but I say to all the councils, I don't think this is just a property play. We have to add value. SBS in the West has to help Western Sydney communities tell their story. And SBS in the West has to help partner with academic institutions so governments can get better at dealing with culled communities in their public pronouncements. We want to add value when SBS comes to Western Sydney, not just get cheaper rent. With Andrew Charlton's help, we want DFAT's New Australia India Institute in Parramatta where it should be. And Andrew, I appreciate your support in that, and the Mayor, Donna Davis, as well. We're very proud of the Indian community in Parramatta, and that's where we ought to be building those relationships. We'd like to see you partner with the private sector and the New South Wales Government to build the world's best Indigenous art gallery at Blacktown. in the largest Indigenous community, urban community in Australia, and Australia's only truly global art form. Wouldn't it be a wonderful act of reconciliation to showcase Aboriginal culture and Aboriginal art right there in Blacktown? And lastly, just a little one, how about a fast rail that sets down in the central city? And it's an Olympic Park Parramatta fight at the moment. Kind of know you don't mind fast trains, and when and if that happens, we're happy to host it.